Hi, I'm Annie Fitzsimmons. I'm the Washington REALTORS Legal Hotline lawyer. And this is my friend.
Yes, Ken Sachs, designated broker, Keller Williams, Spokane. Happy to be here.
And instructor extraordinaire. So Ken has graciously joined us in this video series discussing Form 22B. He got a little silly in the last video, but he's going to be in better shape right now. And in this last video in this series, I'd like to discuss the opposite of where we started. In the very first video in this series, we asked, why would a seller ever want to enter a Form 22B Home Sale Contingency Addendum? And in this video, I want to look at that same question from the buyer's perspective, because in the last video, we talked about the consequences to a buyer if a buyer has to waive the home sale contingency addendum, waive the home sale contingency. Because buyer gets a bump notice and buyer really doesn't want to go away. Buyer wants to purchase seller's property. And so if buyer waives their home sale contingency, they waive all of their contingencies and they close the transaction in 30 days.
Right.
And if they don't, they're in default.
Right.
Okay. So my question is, are there some buyers out there using a home sale contingency addendum in a transaction where they don't really need a home sale contingency addendum?
I think absolutely there are buyers out there. And we just spent a number of videos explaining all of the ways in which a buyer could be harmed with this home sale contingency addendum. I mean, including homelessness. That was in an earlier video.
Right.
So I think it's really important buyer brokers have that conversation and really, ask good questions to determine maybe the buyer doesn't need to utilize a Form 22B.
I think there's two questions that every buyer broker needs to ask the buyer before you put a 22B in the transaction. First question is, buyer, you just told me that you need to sell your home before you can buy the seller's home. So I want to ask you a question. When you say that you need to sell your home before you can buy seller's home, what does the word need mean?
Sure.
Does that mean you need to sell your home before you can buy seller's home, meaning you can't buy seller's home if you don't first sell your own home? Or does it mean
It'd be better.
It'd be better.
It'd be better.
I could do it, but in a perfect world, I'd really rather sell my home before I buy seller's home. If that's the answer to the question, and you're going to want to probe a little further, well, what do you mean that you could do it? Does that mean you're going to cash in your stock market? Or your stock account? Does that mean you're going to cash in your 401? Does that mean you're going to go get a bridge loan? Uncle Joey's got money he can give you.
Right.
What is that? And if the buyer can tell you, here's where I could get the money if I had to, then you go to the second question. If the buyer's answer to the first question is no, I have to sell my home before I can buy that home, then that's the end of your questions. You pull out Form 22B and you start writing.
Sure.
But if buyer says, no, I don't want to, but I could buy seller's home without selling my home first, then the next question for the buyer is, okay, buyer, then I want you to think critically and answer this question for me. If you were confronted with a choice of either utilizing the funds you just described to me or walking away from seller's home altogether, which would you choose? Because if your choice is to utilize those funds and purchase seller's home no matter what, even if you don't sell your own home, then we're going to set the 22B aside and we're not going to put you in the position of being confronted with having to waive all of your contingencies and close the transaction. So instead, buyer, let's do this. Let's be completely candid with the seller about what you're doing. Let's say they're going to go get a bridge loan, right?
Okay.
So how long would it take to get a bridge loan? Probably at least 45
More
days,
than 30
right?
days.
I would say at least 45 and maybe even 60 days. If you could negotiate for a 60-day close, and here's how that advantages buyer in an obvious way, it may be in seller's best interest, because even if the agreed 60 days is longer than the normal closing period, if sellers got you locked into 60 days, it's not a home sale contingency. They're not wondering whether they're going to actually have a closing. They know they've got a closing coming, as much as any seller does.
Right.
But they can bank on a move out date, and they're not going to have other buyers still coming in their house and looking around. So seller, 60 days is longer than normal, but here's why this makes sense in this case. Because the buyer would like to sell their home, But they're not creating a home sale contingency. They're not giving themselves an out if they don't. Instead, they're going to go apply right now for a bridge loan, and they're also going to get their house on the market. And in today's market, it may be that they can sell
Sure.
and close their home and fund the purchase of your home with the proceeds of their sale, or at least the down payment, whatever they were trying to fund. And in that case, the buyer right now is going to make 2 loan applications. They're going to make a bridge loan application, and they're going to make a conventional or whatever it would be, assuming they're able to sell their house and fund the transaction. And then this also allows the buyer's broker to have a conversation with the buyer saying, so buyer, move forward immediately on your inspection contingency, your
Yep.
title review contingency, you've got your financing contingency started. Be completely candid with the seller. You use your 22A, mark it for the bridge loan, or 22EF and mark it for, the sale of stock funds or the loan from Uncle Joey or whatever it is,
whatever.
right? So, I don't know, there's a lot more to say about that. I do think, though, that this is when I teach this in class, I often say that the first 4 videos we covered are Form 22B 101. This analysis is at a higher level of thinking, because most buyer brokers, when the buyer says, I need to sell my home before I buy seller's home, they're just going to reach for the 22B. I think a buyer broker sets themselves apart and provides a better service to their buyer.
Sure.
If they can think through this higher level and really analyze this issue.
And to be able to have that conversation, you have to know the form and the forms really, really well.
Right. And you need to know that you might have to supplement. Instead of having the 22B, you're going to use the 22EF to show where those funds are coming
Sure.
from. Or you're going to use the 22A and you're going to explain to the seller that the reason you've marked 2 different loan types is because they're actually making 2 different loan applications because we don't know yet which one they're going to trigger, right?
Right. That's a competent professional. Good.
Amen, brother.
Yeah, I like it. Love it.
Okay. Anything else? Anything else on Form 22B?
I think we've covered the form.
Okay. I think we've covered the form also. But if we've left anything out, or if you have any questions about Form 22B or any of the other forms in our statewide form system, please send an email to me, legalhotline@warealtor.org. Thank you for being a Washington REALTORS member.